everyone's saying I can't box. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. How about that?
Make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to the Puncher's Point. The Benn redemption arc has been crazy. Now, obviously, we are talking about this fight a day after it happened, but Conor Benn defeats Chris Eubank Jr. in the rematch, in the grudge match, and now Conor Benn has officially defeated every opponent he stepped into the ring with. Now, this fight, it was not like the first one by no means. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I didn't expect it to be like the first one. If you ask me what I had the fight, I gave Chris Eubank Jr. 2 rounds, and in my opinion, those were pity rounds. And overall, it was just a dominant performance. We're going to talk about the performance. We're going to talk about the key moments in that performance. We're going to talk about that 12th round especially. But overall, I mean, shout out to Conor Benn. Conor Benn absolutely came in there and he handled business. And not only did he handle business, he did it in the most masterclass fashion that you could possibly think of. And shout out to Chris Eubank Jr. for getting into the ring. There was no quitting him, especially when he got knocked down twice in the 12th round. You know, he could have quit, but he stood on his feet. You know, he stood 10 toes down. He fought throughout the entire fight. It's just, it wasn't good enough. And we're going to talk about what Benn did well and overall what Chris Eubank might have made a mistake with. We're going to talk about all of that. But with all of that being said, we're going to kick right into it. We're going to start off with the strategy grade for Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Now, here's what I will say. One of the keys for Conor Benn in this fight was the jab. I'm going to be honest with you guys. The jab was the biggest key for Conor Benn winning this fight. And I really like the way he used it. Again, he used it any chance he got. And this time around, I said in the prediction episode, I said the last fight around, he didn't really go to the body that much. And he didn't really target the body. And that was a problem for Conor Benn. Was in the first fight, he really didn't target the body that much. This fight, it was a lot different. That jab was constantly ticking onto the body. He was constantly using that jab. He was going high with it. He was going low with it. And overall, he wasn't stopping that jab. That jab was consistent from round 1 all the way to round 12. And I do respect Conor Benn a lot for how he used that jab. The right straight, that started landing. And then once the right straight started landing, you could tell he was really piecing combos together. And the biggest thing about his victory was you could just tell athletically, you could just tell that him being a youthful fighter is what got him this win. Conor Benn came into this fight and he overall handled business, and you could tell he was the more athletic fighter in that ring. He was the fastest fighter in that ring. His punches had a little bit more pop on him. And to be honest with you, I thought he was going to be the lighter fighter in this fight. He was actually the heavier one. You know, he came in at 168 pounds. I think Chris Eubank Jr. was 165 or something like that. So it was kind of shocking that Conor Benn, a guy who has been climbing up 2 to 3 weight classes, is the heavier fighter in this fight. So I found that very interesting. But overall, the jab was very consistent. The right straight was very consistent. And once he started landing those hooks, that was it. Another thing that Conor Benn did a very good job of as well was he did a good job of moving around. You see, that's where I kind of messed up, because my whole key to victory for Conor Benn was getting to the inside. And when you get into the inside, unleash. He stayed on the outside, and it was very shocking to do that against somebody like Chris Eubank Jr., who has a reach advantage on you, who's the more lengthier fighter, who in previous fights has shown a lot more mobility than you. In my opinion, I thought it was very interesting how he kept on to the outside of this fight. It worked because Chris Eubank Jr. could not catch him. And the other thing I also said for Conor Benn was, in order for him to win this fight, he had to slip Eubank's jab. And he didn't slip it, but he parried it a lot. And you could tell every single time Chris Eubank Jr. threw that jab, Conor Benn would block it with the front hand. And I thought that was absolutely genius from Conor Benn to minimize that jab. And once he minimalized that jab, Chris Eubank Jr. really didn't have an answer for it. Now, as far as the mistakes that Chris Eubank Jr. was making, well, one, he was a slower fighter out there, so athletically he couldn't catch him. B, he tried to use that jab, and that jab was not finding home. This was probably his worst fight as far as jab activity. And then last but not least, this was the big one. He didn't throw that uppercut a lot. That uppercut, he said it, is one of his favorite punches, and he didn't throw it a lot. And that's a problem because in this fight, this was a fight where he had to throw that uppercut. This is a fight where he had to hurt Conor Benn. Conor Benn being the younger fighter, Conor Benn being the more fresher fighter. He had to land that uppercut. He had to land those hooks, and he wasn't doing it because A, he couldn't catch him, and B, he wasn't throwing it as much as the first time around. So overall, if I have to give a strategy grade for both these guys, if we had to put it all together and get an overall grade, I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think Conor Benn went in there and he put up a great performance, a masterclass performance. If the strategy grade was based off of just Conor Benn, I'd give it a 10, but it's off of both guys. Chris Eubank Jr., he looked slow. He looked a little bit flat-footed out there. The jab really wasn't connecting. He was trying to stay onto the outside, but he was getting beat at his own game. He wasn't throwing that uppercut as much. Even going to the body really wasn't working as well. He couldn't find a target that was consistently landing on Conor Benn. So in my opinion, as far as strategy, I have to give it a 7.5. Conor Benn did a great job, had a really great game plan. Shout out to him and his team. Chris Eubank Jr. being trained by the great Bomac, it just wasn't enough. And I think this is the first time I've seen Bomac lose a fight in a very long time, which I found very interesting. But overall, Conor Benn had a brilliant game plan to go in there and not only beat Chris Eubank Jr., but just dominate him. Now, we're going to get to the excitement grade. This was a good, exciting fight. I'm going to be honest with you. This is a very good, exciting fight. And the thing that made this fight really exciting was seeing the sweet science that Conor Benn was using. And again, the post-fight interview, they asked him about what the fans could take away from this. And he said, everybody said I can't box, so they can go and smoke that. Because Conor Benn proved that he's not just a puncher. He's a boxer too. And when you put him in the ring with another boxer, he could beat that boxer at his own strength. So Conor Benn did a very good job of that. And what I found very exciting about the fight is Conor Benn really started landing that right straight. That jab right straight combo really started landing on Chris Eubank Jr. He didn't have an answer for it. Then the hooks started landing. What made this fight so exciting was how Conor Benn was piecing everything together round by round. These 2 rounds, he did this very well. Then the next 2 rounds, he added this to his game. And it started with the jab. Then it went from the jab to the overhand right. Then it went from the overhand right to the hooks. Now he started targeting the body a little bit more. When you started noticing how he was putting this entire game plan together as the rounds progressed, it wasn't like he was giving everything in the early rounds, and the late rounds he shut down. Every single round, he was progressing. And to me, that's what made the fight very, very exciting. And then we got to talk about the 12th round. I mean, if we're talking about the 12th round, he hit him with that tremendous jab and then the overhand right. And in my opinion, I think the jab hurt Chris Eubank Jr. first. I know that the overhand right kind of swift his air, probably threw off his equilibrium. But in my opinion, I think the jab is the punch that hurt him when he first got knocked down. And when he got back up, you could tell he put the pressure on Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr., he didn't really recover fully yet. He was trying to stay in the fight, and he stayed in for a very long time, but Conor Benn ended up landing 2 good right hooks on him in the back of the ear. Shout out to Chris Eubank Jr. He got back up. That's another thing that made it an exciting fight was Chris Eubank Jr. He had no quitting him. Regardless of how tough things got, regardless of round by round, him not finding an answer, he didn't have any quitting him. He tried his best. And I thought it was a very exciting fight. I thought the 12th round really added to it. So in my opinion, I'm going to give the excitement grade or the entertainment grade, I'm going to give it a 8.5 out of 10. Now, the stakes, what was on the line in this fight? Well, as far as family legacy, for Conor Benn, it was a chance to have a win for the Benn family. You know, the Benn family, every single time they fought the Eubank, it just never went in their favor. And this is no disrespect to Nigel Benn, but Chris Eubank Sr. had his number. And it wasn't like Nigel Benn was just levels below Chris Eubank Sr. They were both equally good fighters in their prime. The only difference was Chris Eubank Sr. was able to get those wins. Then when you go, or the one win, excuse me, and then there was the draw where a lot of people feel like maybe Benn won that fight. So both fighters, as far as the dads, were very equal. And then you look at these fighters, Chris Eubank Jr., you know, he's one of the older guys in this sport. However, he had a big resurgence with Bomac. Conor Benn, one of the most promising guys in this sport. You had the PED scandal come out, and then he had to get suspended for some time. He took some time off, came back, and this fight was supposed to happen 2 or 3 years ago. It didn't. So overall, there was a lot of things that were conspiring when the first fight happened. But as far as the second fight, for Conor Benn, this was very important because the Benns had to get a win in the win column. And for Conor Benn to wait as long as he did for the rematch, and I mean, I know it wasn't that long, but regardless, when you take a close loss like that, all that time in between, it just feels longer. And he said like he had to prepare for this moment right here. As far as the Eubanks, the reason why this was so important to them was because Chris Eubank Jr., he won, but he didn't win by a big margin. And I think Chris Eubank Jr., in order to prove that he was one of the best fighters in this division, he had to have a dominant win over Conor Benn. But Conor Benn had that dominant win over Eubank, which means now Conor Benn puts himself in a different situation. That'll get to the impact. But as far as stakes, family legacy is always on the line when these two fight. And overall, I think the stakes were the Benns needed this win a lot more than the Eubanks. The Eubanks had to win when it was senior. They had to win when it was junior. They had to draw. They didn't lose to a Benn. Now that's all changed. And I think Conor Benn felt the pressure. And I think that pressure molded him to have a great performance in this fight by getting the win for himself. And on top of that, this was important to him because he had to beat Chris Eubank Jr. to move on in his career and pursue a world title that he hasn't pursued yet. So shout out to Conor Benn. And I think the stakes, if you ask me what the stakes were in this fight, I'm going to be honest with you. I give him an 8. And then last but not least, as far as the grades, we go to the impact. Now, what was the impact for this fight? And I'm not going to lie to you. The impact grade, I'm going to say this. I'm going to give it a 7. The reason why I give the impact grade a 7 out of 10 is because, okay, Conor Benn gets this win, and now the Benns have a win over the Eubanks. That's great and all. However, what comes after this? What is the impact of that division? And Conor Benn said that he wants to go down to 147 again, which is crazy that he's dropping down 27 pounds to go back to his natural weight class. I find that extremely crazy. I'm very interested to see how he's going to handle that weight drop, that weight cut. But what I will say about Conor Benn is this impacts the division because I think that win against Chris Eubank Jr., I think that puts him in a good spot to get a title shot. However, there's nothing guaranteed. They asked him, what do you want next? He said, I don't want to fight Eubank no more. I already proved I can dominantly beat him. I want to fight either the winner of Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia. I want to fight Devin Haney. I want to fight some of those guys at 147 pounds. And I don't blame him because it's time for Conor Benn to chase after a belt. And so I think that win against Eubank Jr. puts him in a good position to get a title fight. However, nothing's set in stone. Obviously, Devin Haney is going to go and fight Brian Norman. We're going to see how that goes. We're going to obviously cover that fight. And you got Ryan Garcia and Mario Barrios being planned. We're going to see how that goes. But overall, 147-pound division, it's starting to stack up. It's starting to slowly turn into a very interesting division. And now Conor Benn going back to that division, it's only going to get a lot more interesting. So as far as impact, I'm not going to put it too high. I'm going to give it a 7 just because nothing's set in stone. But I do think this is a good start for Conor Benn's career and a good start for him to chase a world championship. And so when you put it all together, the overall grade for this fight, it's going to be 7.88 out of 10. Again, very high on the list. It's not the number one score, but regardless. And I think that when I go and I look at it, the strategy between them both, 7.5, I think that's fair. The entertainment grade, 8.5. I don't think it was the most exciting fight because it wasn't as exciting as the first one. I'll say that right now. Stakes, I mean, if you want to value family legacy a lot more than anything, then you could put the stakes higher, but I think 8's fair. And then 7.5, excuse me for the impact grade. I had it at a 7.5 out of 10, not a 7. And the only reason why I had it a little bit higher is because I think this puts Conor Benn in a better situation. So 7.5 as far as impact grade. I do apologize for that. But the overall grade is going to be 7.88 out of 10. I think that's fair, honestly. Now, with all of that being said, what is next for Conor Benn? What is next for Conor Benn as he pursues his career? What is next for Conor Benn as he pursues his career? And honestly, when I go and I look at it, there's some fights that you could make. Now, I'm going to answer this first question. I'm going to answer, should he do the trilogy fight with Chris Eubank Jr.? I'm going to be opposed to it. But at the same time, I feel like you dominated Chris Eubank Jr. in this fight so much that I really can't see the third fight changing as much because this was more of Conor Benn being youthful. This was more of Conor Benn being more athletic. And I don't think that if this next fight happens, unless Chris Eubank Jr. gets a knockdown or gets a knockout, I don't think that if they were to have a trilogy, I don't think really anything changes. I think Conor Benn sticks with the same game plan. He wins. I knew Conor Benn was going to win this fight. I thought it was going to be a lot closer, but I knew he was going to win this fight. And the reason why I knew was because I knew that this wasn't the best Conor Benn that I've seen. However, I seen all I needed to see from Chris Eubank Jr. I've seen him get hurt in the first fight. I seen the mistakes that he made in that first fight. I seen his best strengths in that first fight. And I said to myself, if Conor Benn comes prepared the way I think he will, I don't see Chris Eubank Jr. winning this fight. So I knew Conor Benn was going to win. I didn't think it was going to be this dominant. However, what I will say is I don't think it makes sense for him to fight Chris Eubank Jr. again. I think he's past this part of his career. And in my opinion, if I had to pick one opponent for him, honestly, why not do him versus Ryan Garcia? I mean, I know he says he wants to go for a title. Now, who knows what happens between Ryan Garcia and Mario Barrios if that fight does conspire, if that fight does happen. Who knows what happens? But regardless, I think the best fight for Conor Benn right now at 147 is Ryan Garcia. And the reason why, I'm going to give you some reasons. So, number one, because both of these guys, they ran into each other before and it looked like they had a little bit of an intense face-off or a meet-up. It looks like they had a little bit of an intense meetup. Do what you will with that information. So there's that. They got the history right there. I think both of these guys would make good for a good presser. Number two, Ryan Garcia is one of the biggest stars in boxing as far as the United States. Conor Benn, he's starting to become a big star when it comes to British boxing. So I think when you put those two together, it's going to sell out for a great fight, regardless of whether there's a title on the line or not. So I do think that that has a good aspect into it. And then last but not least, Ryan Garcia, again, he's going up to 147. He's going to need a challenge. I know he's fighting Barrios. Barrios is a decent fighter, but I do think Conor Benn's a level up. And I think his fight against Conor Benn is going to show exactly what type of fighter Ryan Garcia is. And I think this fight against Ryan Garcia for Conor Benn, I'm very curious to see what he's going to do against a guy who packs that much power in his punches like a Ryan Garcia. I'm curious to see how he takes that. Because if you could take the power of a Ryan Garcia, I don't care that he's not a true 147-pounder. Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, I could argue he's got some of the best power in 147 pounds. You can argue it's Brian Norman, but overall, Ryan Garcia has not given me a reason not to say he doesn't have power. So, in my opinion, I would really like to see how Conor Benn does against a strong fighter like Ryan Garcia, a guy who's probably faster than him, a guy who's probably packs a bigger punch than him. I want to see what Conor Benn does against that guy, because then I'm going to see how good of a boxer Conor Benn is. And for Ryan Garcia, I think going up against somebody like Conor Benn, it does great for your stardom. And on top of that, I think with the heat and the momentum that Conor Benn has right now, I think Ryan Garcia can definitely make the most out of a fight against Conor Benn. So I do think it's a fight that would absolutely be great to have. I think you can have it in Los Angeles, in my opinion. I think it'll sell, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's the UK, it don't matter. I think this fight will sell. So I would say that's the biggest fight I would like to see Conor Benn have is against Ryan Garcia, regardless of whether it's for a title or not. All of that being said, it's time for us to log out. Again, make sure y'all continue to tune into the Punch This Point. Make sure y'all continue to follow the podcast platforms, the social medias, the YouTube channel, all those types of things. And overall, the next time you're going to see me, you're going to do a prediction episode with Devin Haney and Brian Norman. I'm going to try to get Breezy on for that one, considering Breezy is a big Devin Haney fan. I'd love to get his insight on this because he has a good perspective on how this fight could go. But overall, we'll see. But that's the next episode you're going to get is going to be Devin Haney versus Brian Norman preview and prediction. So make sure y'all stay tuned in for that. And with that being said, make sure y'all continue to show love to the Puncher's Point. We're going to keep on being consistent. We're going to keep on dropping bangers after bangers after bangers. And last but not least, make sure y'all continue to stay on point with the Puncher's Point.